Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 7th Annual Islamic Arts Festival. My name is Zulfiqar Ali, and I will be hosting the calligraphy show today. It's my honor to introduce Osama Qureshy. He is really good in solas. And today we will write names, duas, and phrases. So without further delay, I will ask Osama Qureshy to introduce himself, what was his art genre, and then inshallah ta'ala write some names and duas and phrases.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure being here today. Assalamu alaikum to everyone, and like Dr. Ali was saying, I've kind of found myself doing calligraphy. I think my journey started when I was very young. I noticed that I had an aptitude for writing very well, and I had really good handwriting. And knowing Islam's ambivalence towards figurative art, I decided to expand my capabilities in that realm. And so from good handwriting, it sort of became more into calligraphy, especially around the time that I was in college. It sort of became an exercise in stress relief, especially after like a bad test or something like that. I just sit back down and try to write something out. However, as I also grew older, I realized the spiritual significance of it. And most of my art is actually sacred rather than secular, which is a hallmark, I think, of Islamic art as compared to different disciplines. And after all, Islamic art or calligraphy in the Islamic tradition started out by beautifying the Quran, and it's no coincidence that was the case, because for Muslims, the Word of God, which is the absolute truth, deserves its own beauty. As Plato said himself, beauty is the splendor of truth. And for Muslims, there's nothing more truthful than God's word itself. So having said that, I guess we can get started and write some names down, inshallah. Right?
All right. Inshallah, yeah. Start with maybe anything that you like to write.
All right.
And then I will give the list that I have received so far.
Okay. Well, I wanted to start with one that Dr. Ali mentioned before we got started today. And I know because my mom is really, really excited about this show and has been watching it nonstop for the past few days, or for the few days, for the past few months, which is Ertuğrul. And it's a show from Turkey. And it's sort of taken over the entire Muslim world. I think it's broken Guinness World Book Records for viewership. And so I'll probably start with that one. The main protagonist character's name is Ertuğrul, which I think is Turkish. And when I looked it up, it meant brave man. I don't think it has a direct translation into Arabic. Nevertheless, we can write it down in the script. And so, having said that, I'll get started.
So he wrote Aleph first, and then this Ra.
So Arabic, like English, is a language that has an alphabet. So a lot of people ask me in the past when I've done these calligraphy workshops or name writing sessions, is like, oh, is it like Mandarin, in which you have actual pictorial letter forms? And that's not the case. You have to spell letters out, and the letters change forms as you write, and depending on where they are located within a word. So a letter might look different in the start of a word, in the middle of a word, and in the end of a word. Can all be different letter forms, but they're the same letter. And so that takes a little bit of practice getting used to, especially someone coming from the English tradition or from the Latin scripts, where everything always looks the same, no matter where it's positioned in the word form.
While he's writing, I can give you some history about Ertugrul. He was a father of Ertugrul. His other, full name is called Ertugrul Ghazi, and he was a father of Usman. Usman is the one who was the founder of Ottoman Empire, and Ertugrul, he started from a very humble background, and then he became the king of all that area. He fought many wars. So he became. There is as Osama mentioned, um, Netflix has a whole series on the life of Ertugrul and how he conquered such a vast area, and then his son became the founder of the Ottoman Empire.
And I think it's fitting that we start with Ertugrul because I feel like as it relates to this particular script, which is Thuluth, it really reached its heyday under the Ottoman Empire. And if you're ever fortunate enough to go to Turkey or places where the Ottoman Empire was, you'll still see these monumental structures. And the script that you'll see that looks like Arabic, and it could either be Arabic or Turkish or Ottoman Turkish, will most of the time be written in Thuluth. So it has a very rich imperial legacy. And I feel like to this day, you'll see Thuluth written on sort of impactful documents, official government decrees in Arabic-speaking countries, or in the title of books. So it has that heft to it, that this is important kind of script.
And especially if you took already went through the video of that class, and somebody who took the class on Solus, they kind of emphasize on that and the beauty of it, and how you can fit into a very nice geometric figure to make it look more beautiful.
So now I'm going to go back and write some diacritical marks or letter forms, or dots as it's more colloquially referred to. And these basically distinguish similar letter forms from other ones, depending on how many dots are there. So Ertugrul has a T in it, or a T sounding letter form. And so that's usually denoted by 2 dots on top of the base letter. If it was 3 dots, that would become a TH sound, like th. If it was a Y sounding letter form, you'd actually see me put the 2 dots on the bottom. And so a cluster of letters actually have a very similar morphology, but depending on where you put these dots can actually change the letter entirely. So
these are kind of vowels, closest to that in English is vowels.
Yeah, the diacritical marks are actually, yes, like vowels, and they're usually denoted by sort of slanting lines that can either be on top or on bottom of the letters. And so if you have a slanting line on top, that's the A sound, and then if it's on the bottom, it would be the EE sound, or E. Because Ertugrul starts with an E, I would start with that letter form actually being on the bottom. And so we'll denote the alif on the bottom right here. And there we go. Ertugrul. So now I'm just going to sort of finish it off a little bit. Thuluth is also characterized from other scripts in that it has these sort of pointed hook at the beginning of some letters. And it adds a sort of movement to the letter that otherwise would not be there. And it looks quite nice, if I say so myself. And now I'm going to go back and add the aforementioned diacritical marks. So here's the first letter, So I'm going to put a line underneath. This is a connecting mark. It's called a hamza, or a sukun, I'm sorry, in Arabic. And then we have the U letter vowel on top. And I'm going to switch for the other one. And you might see me switching between pens to adjust for width. And that's up to the artist's discretion, which needs to be smaller, which needs to be bigger, because in the end, you want it to look nice and you want the composition to have a sense of balance there. You don't want all of the letter form to be on one end and then something sticking out on the other end, unless, of course, it's very deliberate and that's what's happening. So, for example, like the word Ali, radiallahu anhu, which was the fourth caliph in Islamic history, who was characterized by having a two-pronged sword. And it actually features a lot in his iconography. So oftentimes you'll see people write his name, Ali, but then they'll extend out the ya all the way out and then it'll end in two prongs. And so those are some of the ways you can be a lot more creative when it comes to this sort of thing. And it sort of melds your traditional art with the letter morphologies themselves.
So you can make shapes with the writing, but you can also embed shapes in the writing.
Exactly, yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah. And oftentimes you'll see, particularly in South Asia, you'll see, I think, compositions about Ali whose nickname was like Haidar, and he'll be in a lion. So everything written will be in the form of a lion. And that's actually quite interesting to see. And a lot of people who might not be familiar with Islamic calligraphy and might think that we are completely against figurative art, it's sort of in a convenient loophole that a lot of Islamic artists have employed in the past.
And I see sometimes ships being
exactly.
made of the calligraphy. Sometimes, you know, the flowers.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So while he is working on it, I can show some of his columns and pens, and you can see, appreciate it, how dedicated and how passionate he is about his calligraphy. So for example, this is made of reed, very beautiful column, this one, and these one also columns, but you can see intricate design, but each of them is a different size. So what calligraphy does is that everything is in proportion. So when he, for example, he is writing Aleph, it has a certain length, as was explained in the Solus calligraphy class this morning. And then if you want to write smaller one, you can use a smaller pen. And this one again is the, you know, kind of the wood. Is it Java, right? This one?
Yeah, it's actually a Javanese thorn. And it's supposed to be able to write a lot. So like any other sort of pen that one might have, and you can look at it if you want to look a little closer, you can see that it's cut at a certain angle. Traditionally, I think it's around 40 degrees, if I'm not mistaken. And most of the time in the traditional Islamic world and the Arabic calligraphy, you'll see them use reeds like this. This one is used a reed sourced from Iran. And most of the time they have to go through a process in which they're dried out for a few months, and then they're cured in that sense, and then they'll be ready to write. With these are from the island of Java, as Dr. Ali said, and they're made of a type of thorn which is extremely hard. And I think when I bought this pen or this pen set, though what really had sold me was that there was a legend that someone had written an entire Quran with one pen. Because normally you always have to like sharpen your pen,
Yes.
because it wears out over time when you're writing, and those edges are important to make sure that your letters look crisp, so to speak. And if you don't, then it doesn't look as nice. But with this, I don't anticipate me ever having to sharpen it. So that's
And
nice.
I heard you cannot have a bigger column in this one because usually it's made of thorn, so you cannot have a much bigger tip than few millimeters.
Yeah, that's the limiting factor as well.
Like,
Uh-huh.
can you write? What else do you want to show? Or maybe I have some word that I can.
Okay, we can go on with a different word. That's fine.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So this is orthograph, as mentioned again. This is famous series. Yeah, this is the famous Netflix series. Lot of seasons in that, and very famous drama. So this is the name of orthograph in that.
How about let's switch gears and use a particular prayer that I was a big fan of, especially when I was in school. And anyone who's a Muslim kid who's going through school at the time knows this particular, what we call dua or invocation. And it is, I think you can guess, Rabbi zidni ilma, which means, my Lord, increase me in knowledge. And throughout college, when you're trying to cram for a test or something like that, it's always on the back of your mind. It's just Rabbi zidni ilma, Rabbi zidni ilma, Rabbi zidni ilma, and then Pixie. So, let's see.
Nice.
And speaking of knowledge, unfortunately, I think religion in general has a bad rap, at least in Western society, as being something that you simply close your eyes, obey, and don't critically think about. In Islam, seeking knowledge is contingent upon every person. In fact, there is a prophetic narration, or hadith, as we say in Arabic, which is, seek knowledge even if it's in China. In China, in the time of the Prophet, was a journey that would probably take years. And so when people say, oh, quote unquote, religious people are unthinking, or they're encouraged by their faith not to think too deeply on certain matters, I don't necessarily think that applies to the Islamic tradition, at least. It's one that encourages deep thought. It encourages critical thinking, and things that we need, regardless of what era you're living in.
And that is knowledge that is related to religion, and also knowledge that is for the use of people.
Oh, totally.
Ilm Nafi and Ilm Sharia, both are required.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I think there's also another hadith in regards to that said that knowledge is the lost property of the believer, and he takes it wherever he finds it. And they didn't specify what sort of knowledge that was. That could be the sacred or secular.
Again, as Osama mentioned, that for him is a relief, stress relief, or what we call meditation. I myself think calligraphy as a meditation. It gives you, it's like you kind of zone out when doing calligraphy, and you're in another dimension practically. So it's especially in a difficult time, that helps a lot. And there is a dua about it. Actually, there is a ayah in Quran, inna ma'al usri yusra. So whenever you go through difficulty, you can read this, inna ma'al usri yusra. Surely after every difficulty, there is a relief. So calligraphy kind of ties up into the whole picture, grand picture. So while he's writing, maybe I can explain a little bit. For example, this one, I will use a pen, a pen to show you. This is Ra, Rab, B, and this is Za, Dal, so Zid, and then he's writing Ni again. So these are composition, combining two letters together. Actually, when you're doing calligraphy in Arabic calligraphy, and sometimes you're looking for what would be, if you're writing a letter, you have to make in your head maybe 3 or 4 letters ahead of it, how this will look, to make it more beautiful.
Right.
So when did you started this journey? How old you were the first time you did calligraphy?
The first time I did calligraphy, I didn't know what to call it. I didn't know what I was doing. I remember I was fortunate enough to have an imam when I was growing up in Corpus Christi, Texas, who was very, very skilled in this art form. And I noticed he writes just as well as I see it in the Quran. At the time I didn't know, but it was the Naskh script. And then I decided to sort of iterate on that and try to copy it and try to make the letter forms as closely resembling what he did and what was in the Quran as much as possible. It was only until I think the advent of YouTube, which really opened up these possibilities for someone who was like an amateur enthusiast like me, to really see how people hold the pen, the materials that are used, and really elevate the level of discourse that is in calligraphy. And fortunately enough, with kids that are growing up these days, they have a lot more resources than I did, for example, growing up in the 90s. Organizations like these, the Islamic Arts Society, gives people an organization to go to if they're interested, and there's a lot of resources. And if you even want to take classes, something that was unheard of as short as 10 years ago, no one even thought about it. And I think the founders of this organization deserve a lot of credit in that respect.
Yeah, at Islamic Arts Society, we are trying our best to provide the platform, and artists like you, especially the young artists, they are inspiring other young artists, because we don't want it to just disappear with me or the other founders. So now Osama is adding vowels or diacritical marks that change how you pronounce it. And also he adds some beautification to it by adding some smaller shapes into it.
Yeah, as going off of what Dr. Ali was saying, the diacritical marks are a component of the artwork itself when the final composition comes together. And people who even can read Arabic in a devotional sense oftentimes have a difficulty reading calligraphic compositions because it's too busy for them and they can't really decipher what's going on. But that in itself is an interesting challenge, especially if you go into more advanced scripts like Diwani, which was, I think, developed around the 17th century or the 18th century in the Ottoman Turkey. When you see it just from a distance, it doesn't look like it's anything legible. But when you get up close to it, you see the swirling lines, and everything has actual orthographic value. And those for me are when I'm as just a consumer of calligraphy, are probably the most interesting compositions because they don't seem like anything until you get up close and then you can read it. And I think that's one personal thing that I have about whenever I'm doing calligraphy or writing something down, because there's these new trends that I see in calligraphy called calligraffiti, which is sort of graffitiized calligraphy. And I've seen that a lot with Latin scripts. Mm-hmm. But the problem I have is that sometimes it's just completely illegible, and I don't necessarily see the value in that.
Do you have anything that to inspire young artists, young calligrapher? Mm-hmm. It takes a long time to learn calligraphy, but I see that you're studying here and then you're doing a job and then at the same time you do calligraphy. Mm-hmm. Is there any way that our audience can do the same thing?
Well, I think when it comes, it's not like art is dying out, but we are seeing, for example, a de-emphasis on the written arts, and that's starting at schools. In fact, my nephew, I just ordered some papers for him because he wanted to have good handwriting like me. And I just ordered a bunch of papers, and we're going to be starting to write. So if you're interested in this, and it is, like you said, like you're helping to preserve a tradition, and that links you back generations to different Muslims, and it's like a connection to the past.
So thank you, everybody who's watching it. Inshallah ta'ala, we will see you tomorrow again. Tomorrow we have another artist, calligrapher, Huzaifa Taki. He will be here, and inshallah ta'ala, he will show his beautiful calligraphy. So see you tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.